Close your eyes and cast your mind back, not to the age of dinosaurs, nor to the ice ages that sculpted our recent past, but to a time far more intimate to our own story. Travel with us 6 million years into Earth's past, to a world on the brink of a monumental transformation. This wasn't merely a backdrop for life. It was an active, dynamic stage, where the very ground beneath our ancestors' feet was shifting, where climates were changing, and where the forces of geology were setting the scene for the emergence of humanity itself. This was the world of Ardipithecus, our earliest known ancestor, and its story is inextricably linked to a planet in profound flux. At the heart of this planetary drama lay a colossal geological event, one that would ripple across continents and fundamentally alter global climate patterns, the Messinian salinity crisis. For millions of years, the ancient Tethys Sea, a vast ocean that once separated Africa and Eurasia, had been steadily shrinking. Around 6 million years ago, this process reached its dramatic climax. The relentless northward movement of the African tectonic plate, driven by the slow but unstoppable forces of continental drift, began to pinch off the connection between the Tethys and the Atlantic Ocean. Imagine a colossal geological cork being slowly pushed into a bottleneck. The Strait of Gibraltar, the narrow gateway we know today, was not yet fully formed, or perhaps was repeatedly opening and closing, creating an intermittent barrier. With its connection to the vast Atlantic severed or severely restricted, the Mediterranean Sea began to dry up. This wasn't a gradual evaporation over centuries. It was a catastrophic event on a geological timescale. Over hundreds of thousands of years, and perhaps in multiple rapid cycles, the Mediterranean, cut off from its oceanic supply, became a giant, desiccating basin. The intense evaporation under the hot sun left behind colossal deposits of salt, some reaching depths of several kilometers, now buried beneath the modern Mediterranean seafloor. Picture an enormous barren wasteland dotted with hypersaline lakes and vast shimmering salt flats, where once a vibrant sea had thrived. This dramatic desiccation event, while geographically distant from East Africa, had far-reaching climatic consequences. The drying of the Mediterranean wasn't just a local phenomenon. It sent ripples across the global climate system. The absence of a large, moderating body of water altered atmospheric circulation patterns and rainfall distribution. Some scientific models suggest that this massive geological event could have contributed to a global cooling trend and, more critically for our story, led to increased aridity in parts of Africa, particularly East Africa. Less moisture was being evaporated from the Mediterranean to be carried by winds across the continent. This wasn't an overnight desertification, but a subtle, yet persistent, shift towards more seasonal rainfall and a gradual expansion of drier, more open environments. Simultaneously, another immense geological force was at play directly within the cradle of human evolution, the East African Rift Valley. This colossal geological tear, stretching thousands of kilometers from the Red Sea down through East Africa, was, and still is, a zone where the African tectonic plate is slowly but relentlessly pulling apart. This process created a dramatic and ever-changing landscape of deep valleys, towering volcanoes, and a series of long, narrow lakes. The uplift of the rift shoulders created rain shadows, further contributing to regional drying on the leeward side, while the valleys themselves became basins for sediment accumulation, perfectly preserving the remains of ancient life. The volcanic activity associated with the rift also provided layers of ash that are crucial for precisely dating the fossils found within these sediments. The combined effects of the Messinian salinity crisis and the ongoing East African rifting created a mosaic of environments. While dense forests still existed, particularly along rivers and in wetter pockets, they were becoming increasingly fragmented. The landscape was transitioning from a continuous canopy to a patchwork of woodlands, gallery forests, and nascent grasslands. This wasn't a sudden, dramatic shift from forest to savanna, but a gradual, complex process, creating new ecological niches and posing new challenges for the creatures that called this region home. Life had to adapt to a world where access to resources might require traversing more open ground, where shelter was less continuous, and where the climate was becoming less predictable. It was into this dynamic, ever-changing world that Ardipithecus emerged. This wasn't a stable, unchanging Eden. It was a crucible of environmental pressure and evolutionary opportunity. The shifting continents, the drying seas, the rising mountains, all conspired to create a unique set of circumstances that would favor new adaptations, particularly those related to movement and resource acquisition in a more varied landscape. The stage was set for a creature that would embody a crucial transition, a bridge between our ape ancestors and the earliest members of the human family. Its very existence is a testament to the power of environmental change to drive evolutionary innovation. Understanding this ancient, shifting world is paramount to understanding Ardipithecus. It wasn't just a creature that lived 6 million years ago. It was a product of its time, shaped by the immense geological and climatic forces that defined its existence. Its adaptations, its lifestyle, and its very place in our family tree are all echoes of a planet in flux, a world undergoing its grand transformation. In our last exploration, we peeled back the layers of time to reveal a planet in geological turmoil 6 million years ago. The colossal forces of continental drift, the dramatic drying of the Mediterranean Sea, and the relentless tearing apart of the East African Rift Valley were reshaping Earth's surface and its climate. This wasn't just a distant backdrop. It was the very crucible in which our earliest known ancestor, Ardipithecus, would emerge. Now, we narrow our focus, stepping directly into the specific world this enigmatic creature inhabited, a world that profoundly challenges long-held assumptions about the origins of humanity. The forest home, forest edge, a mosaic world. For decades, the prevailing narrative of human evolution was deeply rooted in the savanna hypothesis. This idea posited that our ancestors were driven from dense forests onto vast open grasslands by a drying climate. In this new, exposed environment, the theory went, upright walking, or bipedalism, evolved as an adaptation for seeing over tall grasses, carrying food, or regulating body temperature under the open sun. It's a compelling story, one that paints a clear picture of early hominins bravely venturing into the unknown. However, as the fossil record expands and scientific techniques grow more sophisticated, the picture of Ardipithecus's world has become far more nuanced, revealing a reality that is both more complex and perhaps even more fascinating. The most crucial insights into Ardipithecus's environment come from the meticulously excavated fossil sites in the Middle Awash region of Ethiopia, particularly Aramis. Here, a dedicated team of paleontologists, led by Tim White, spent years unearthing not just the bones of Ardipithecus, but also a treasure trove of associated flora and fauna. This multidisciplinary approach, combining fossil analysis with geology, paleobotany, and paleoecology, allowed scientists to reconstruct the ancient landscape with astonishing detail, painting a picture very different from the sweeping savannas of earlier theories. The evidence from Aramis suggests that Ardipithecus was not living in open grassland, but rather in a wooded environment, a mosaic of habitats that offered both arboreal resources and limited opportunities for terrestrial movement. The paleobotanical evidence from Aramis is particularly compelling. Scientists meticulously analyzed fossilized pollen, phytoliths, microscopic silica structures found in plant cells, and even fragments of fossilized wood. The types of pollen recovered were overwhelmingly from trees and shrubs, indicative of a woodland or gallery forest, not open grassland. For instance, the presence of fossilized fig tree wood and palm phytoliths strongly suggests a habitat with significant tree cover and access to water. These plants thrive in more humid, forested conditions, not the dry, open expanses of a true savanna. The absence of widespread grass pollen, which would be abundant in a grassland environment, further supports this conclusion. This botanical fingerprint firmly places Ardipithecus within a more sheltered arboreal setting. Complementing the plant evidence, the fossilized fauna found alongside Ardipithecus further strengthens the woodland argument. The animal bones recovered at Aramis tell a story of a diverse ecosystem dominated by creatures adapted to forested or mixed woodland environments. Researchers found abundant remains of forest-dwelling monkeys, such as columbines, which are primarily leaf eaters and spend most of their lives in trees. There were also fossils of kudu, a spiral-horned antelope that prefers dense bush and woodland, and forest-adapted pigs. The presence of peacocks and other forest birds also points away from open grasslands. Crucially, there was a notable scarcity of animals typically associated with open savannas, such as gazelles, wildebeest, and large grazing animals. The predators present, like large cats and crocodiles, would have been at home in a wooded, swampy environment. This faunal assemblage paints a consistent picture of a habitat with significant tree cover and permanent water sources, a far cry from the classic savanna. So, what exactly did this mosaic world look like? Imagine a landscape that wasn't uniformly dense rainforest, nor was it an endless expanse of grass. Instead, it was a patchwork. Areas of dense woodland and gallery forests, strips of forest growing along rivers or permanent water sources, interspersed with more open patches of shrubland or very nascent, sparse grasslands. The East African Rift Valley, with its geological activity, would have contributed to this mosaic, creating varied topography and localized microclimates. Rivers and lakes would have been crucial arteries of life, providing consistent water and supporting the luscious vegetation. This was a dynamic, ever-changing environment where the boundaries between different habitat types were fluid and constantly shifting. This mosaic nature of Ardipithecus's habitat presented both challenges and opportunities. For a primate, the woodlands and gallery forests provided essential arboreal resources, fruits, leaves, and insects for food, as well as crucial shelter from predators and the elements. The trees offered a safe haven, a vertical escape route from terrestrial threats. However, the fragmentation of these forests meant that Ardipithecus would have occasionally needed to traverse more open ground, to move between patches of woodland, to reach new food sources, or to access water. This necessity would have placed new selective pressures on its locomotion, perhaps favoring adaptations that allowed for more efficient movement on the ground, even if only for short distances. The presence of permanent water sources like rivers and lakes was also critical. These would have been magnets for all forms of life, providing hydration and supporting richer vegetation. Ardipithecus would have relied on these water sources, and their proximity would have influenced its foraging, patterns, and daily movements. The constant availability of water would have also contributed to the overall humidity of its immediate environment, even as the broader climate trend leaned towards aridity. Understanding this specific mosaic environment is paramount because it fundamentally reshapes our understanding of why bipedalism might have evolved. If Ardipithecus was primarily a woodland dweller, then the shift to upright walking wasn't necessarily about striding across vast grasslands. Instead, it might have been about a more efficient way to move within a wooded environment, perhaps to carry food, to access resources on the ground while still being able to climb, or even to navigate unstable branches. This complex interplay between a changing planet and an evolving primate sets the stage for the truly remarkable anatomical adaptations we find in Ardipithecus. In our previous segment, we meticulously reconstructed the world of Ardipithecus 6 million years ago, revealing a mosaic of woodlands and forest edges, a far cry from the open savannas once thought to be the cradle of bipedalism. This nuanced understanding of its habitat sets the stage for the most profound revelation about this ancient hominin, its own body. Today, we embark on a scientific detective story, piecing together fragments of bone to uncover the extraordinary anatomy of a pioneer, the first tangible glimpse of our own unique form, and the perplexing clues it offers about the very first steps towards humanity. For decades, the earliest chapters of human evolution remained largely blank, filled with theoretical constructs and tantalizing but incomplete fossil finds. Then, in the mid-1990s, a breakthrough began to emerge from the Middle Awash region of Ethiopia, specifically the Aramis site. Led by paleoanthropologist Tim White, a team began unearthing what would become the most complete early hominin skeleton ever discovered, dating back approximately 4.4 million years. This remarkable individual, a female, was affectionately nicknamed Ardi, and formally classified as Ardipithecus ramidus. Her discovery was not just a new fossil, it was a seismic event in paleoanthropology, forcing scientists to fundamentally reevaluate their understanding of how and why humans began walking upright. What makes Ardi so revolutionary is her mosaic of features, a perplexing blend of traits that are distinctly ape-like, combined with others that are surprisingly human-like. It's as if evolution was experimenting, trying out different combinations of adaptations in response to the changing environment. This mosaic anatomy is the key to understanding Ardipithecus's unique place in our family tree, a creature that defies easy categorization and challenges the notion of a simple, linear progression from ape to human. Let's begin with the most striking and debated feature, Ardi's foot. When scientists first examined her foot bones, they were met with a contradiction. On one hand, she possessed a grasping big toe, hallux, much like a chimpanzee or gorilla. This opposable toe, splayed out from the rest of the foot, is a hallmark adaptation for arboreal life, allowing a primate to securely grip branches and climb effectively. It's a feature perfectly suited for life in the trees, confirming her strong arboreal capabilities. On the other hand, the rest of Ardi's foot, particularly the midfoot, exhibited a surprising rigidity. Unlike the flexible ape-like midfoot that acts like a hinge for grasping, Ardi's midfoot was stiffened, forming a more stable platform. This rigidity is a characteristic seen in human feet, which are designed for pushing off the ground efficiently during bipedal walking. The combination of a grasping big toe and a rigid midfoot suggests a unique form of locomotion, something distinct from both modern apes and later hominins. It implies a foot that could still grasp branches but was also capable of supporting weight during terrestrial excursions. Moving up the skeleton, Ardi's pelvis provides equally fascinating yet complex clues about her locomotion. The pelvis of a bipedal creature, like a human, is short and broad, allowing for the attachment of gluteal muscles that stabilize the trunk during upright walking. In contrast, the pelvis of a quadrupedal ape is long and narrow, suited for supporting organs while climbing and for muscle attachments that facilitate quadrupedal movement. Ardi's pelvis, while not fully human-like, shows a crucial reorganization of the ilium, the upper blade of the pelvis. It's broader and shorter than that of an ape, suggesting that some of the gluteal muscles, which in apes pull the leg backward, were beginning to be reoriented to pull the leg sideways, a critical adaptation for stabilizing the body during bipedal stance and walking. This indicates that while she may not have walked with the efficiency of a later Australopithecus or modern human, her pelvis was indeed adapted for some degree of upright posture and terrestrial locomotion, even if it was a wobbly or less efficient gait. Her upper limbs further highlight her mosaic nature. Ardi possessed long arms and fingers, a feature characteristic of arboreal primates that rely on climbing and suspension for movement through trees. Her wrist bones also showed a flexibility that is more akin to apes, allowing for greater range of motion during climbing, rather than the stiff, weight-bearing wrists of knuckle walkers like chimpanzees and gorillas. This suggests that while she may have engaged in some form of palm walking on branches, she was not a knuckle walker on the ground. The combination of long, strong arms and flexible wrists paints a picture of a creature that was equally at home in the trees as it was experimenting with upright movement on the ground. Perhaps one of the most intriguing features of Ardipithecus is its dentition, particularly the canine teeth. Unlike the large, sharp projecting canines found in male chimpanzees and gorillas, which are used for aggressive display and male-male competition, Ardi's canines were small and non-projecting, much more similar in size and shape to those of early hominins and modern humans. This reduction in canine size is often interpreted as a sign of reduced male-male aggression and a shift in social dynamics, possibly indicating a greater degree of cooperation or pair bonding within the group. If males were not constantly fighting for access to females, the need for large, intimidating canines would diminish. This dental evidence offers a fascinating glimpse into the potential social behaviors of our earliest ancestors, suggesting a departure from the more aggressive social structures seen in many modern apes. The skull and brain size of Ardipithecus also provide important insights. Ardi's brain was relatively small, estimated to be around 350 cubic centimeters, comparable to that of a modern chimpanzee. This indicates that the initial steps towards bipedalism did not coincide with a significant increase in brain size, suggesting that the pressures driving upright walking were not primarily cognitive. Her skull also shows a foramen magnum, the hole at the base of the skull where the spinal cord exits, positioned more centrally than in apes, but not as far forward as in later hominins. This more central placement is consistent with a head balanced directly atop an upright spine, further supporting the idea of some degree of bipedal posture. The overall interpretation of Ardipithecus's anatomy has led to intense scientific debate. Was Ardi truly bipedal? If so, how efficiently did she walk? The consensus among many researchers is that Ardipithecus represents a unique and transitional form of locomotion, often described as climbing bipedalism or facultative bipedalism. This means she was likely adept at moving through trees, using her grasping feet and long arms, but also capable of walking upright on two legs when on the ground, perhaps for short distances or specific tasks. Her unique foot structure might have allowed her to palm walk on branches, using the rigid midfoot for support, while still retaining the grasping big toe for climbing. This suggests that the earliest forms of bipedalism were not necessarily efficient, long-distance striding, but rather a more cautious, deliberate movement adapted to a mixed forest and woodland environment. The anatomy of Ardipithecus forces us to reconsider the traditional linear model of human evolution. It suggests that the path to bipedalism was not a straight line, but a complex, branching, and experimental journey. It shows that our ancestors retained significant arboreal capabilities even as they began to explore upright movement on the ground. This creature, with its perplexing blend of features, represents a crucial evolutionary experiment, a pivotal moment when our lineage began to diverge from that of other apes. Ardi is not just a fossil. She is a testament to the power of natural selection, shaping life in response to a dynamic planet. Her body tells a story of adaptation, compromise, and the very first tentative steps on the long road to becoming human. Having meticulously dissected the extraordinary anatomy of Ardipithecus in our last segment, we now possess a clearer understanding of its unique blend of ape-like and human-like features. The perplexing mosaic of its foot, pelvis, and upper limbs paints a picture of a creature poised between two worlds. But how did these anatomical compromises translate into daily life? Today, we ascend into the canopy, into the very heart of Ardipithecus's existence, to explore life in the trees, the arboreal master, and understand why, despite its nascent bipedalism, the forest remained its primary domain. The notion of Ardipithecus as a primarily arboreal creature, highly adapted for life in the trees, might seem counterintuitive when discussing an early human ancestor. After all, the defining characteristic of the hominin lineage is bipedalism, upright walking on two legs. However, the fossil evidence, particularly the structure of Ardi's hand, foot, and limb proportions, strongly indicates that she and her species spent a significant amount of time in the trees. This arboreal mastery was not merely a residual trait from a distant ape ancestor, it was a crucial and active part of their survival strategy in the mosaic woodland environments we explored in Part 2. The trees provided essential resources, safety, and a distinct way of moving through their world. Let's revisit Ardi's foot, the feature that perhaps most vividly illustrates her arboreal prowess. While the midfoot showed some rigidity for terrestrial excursions, the grasping big toe, hallux, was undeniably a primary adaptation for climbing. Unlike the adducted, aligned with other toes, big toe of a human, Ardi's hallux was divergent, splayed out to the side, allowing it to oppose the other four toes. Imagine the powerful grip this would provide, enabling her to wrap her foot around branches with remarkable security. This opposable big toe was her primary anchor, a natural clamp that allowed her to navigate the complex three-dimensional world of the forest canopy with confidence. It was this prehensile foot, rather than her hands, that likely bore the primary responsibility for grasping and stability during arboreal locomotion, freeing her hands for other tasks. Complementing her grasping feet were her long arms and fingers. These elongated limbs, reminiscent of modern apes, provided an extended reach, crucial for bridging gaps between branches and for suspending her body during movement. Her fingers, too, were long and curved, ideal for hooking onto branches and maintaining a secure grip. The flexibility in her wrist bones, also more ape-like than human, would have allowed for a greater range of motion during climbing and maneuvering through the dense foliage. This combination of long, strong arms and flexible wrists would have facilitated various forms of arboreal locomotion, from cautious climbing to perhaps some degree of suspension, though not necessarily the rapid, swinging brachiation seen in gibbons. The way Ardipithecus moved through the trees was likely a unique and complex form of locomotion, distinct from both modern apes and later hominins. It's been described as climbing bipedalism or palm walking on branches. Instead of knuckle walking on the ground, which some apes do, Ardipithecus may have used a form of palm walking when moving along larger, more stable branches. This involves placing the palm of the hand flat on the branch, providing a stable base. When combined with her grasping feet, this would have allowed for secure, deliberate movement within the canopy. Her relatively flexible lower back, more similar to a monkey than a rigid-backed ape, would have provided additional agility for navigating the twists and turns of tree branches. This suggests a versatile arboreal repertoire, allowing her to exploit various parts of the tree for different purposes. The trees were not just a means of transport, they were a lifeline for Ardipithecus. The dense canopy provided an abundant and diverse food source. Fruits, tender leaves, young shoots, and perhaps even insects and small invertebrates living within the foliage would have formed the bulk of their diet. The arboreal environment offered a constant, reliable supply of sustenance, a stark contrast to the more scattered and seasonal resources of the open ground. Foraging in the trees would have been a primary daily activity, with individuals or small groups moving methodically through the canopy, exploiting ripe patches and familiar feeding grounds. The ability to access these elevated food sources would have been a significant advantage in a competitive environment. Beyond food, the trees offered crucial shelter and safety. The Carboniferous period, as we know, was a time of diverse and formidable predators. While we don't have direct evidence of the specific predators that hunted Ardipithecus, we can infer the presence of large cats, perhaps early saber-toothed varieties, and other carnivorous mammals that would have posed a significant threat on the ground. Crocodiles would have lurked in the waterways. For a relatively small primate like Ardipithecus, the trees provided an invaluable refuge. By ascending into the canopy, they could escape terrestrial predators, find secure sleeping sites, and perhaps even give birth and raise their young in relative safety, away from the dangers of the forest floor. The dense foliage also offered protection from the elements, providing shade from the sun and shelter from rain. The arboreal lifestyle also sheds light on the development of cognitive abilities. Navigating a complex, three-dimensional environment like a forest canopy requires significant spatial awareness, problem-solving skills, and coordination, remembering the location of food trees, planning routes through branches, and assessing. The stability of supports would have put a premium on cognitive processing. While Ardipithecus's brain size was still relatively small, comparable to a chimpanzee, the demands of its arboreal existence likely contributed to the development of these crucial mental faculties, laying groundwork for future cognitive expansion. In later hominins, the evidence for Ardipithecus's arboreal mastery challenges the long-held assumption that bipedalism evolved after our ancestors had fully abandoned the trees for a life on the savanna. Instead, it suggests a more gradual and complex transition, where arboreal adaptations were maintained even as new forms of terrestrial locomotion were being explored. Ardipithecus was not a creature that had fully committed to life on the ground. It was a versatile primate that could move effectively in both realms, with a clear preference for the safety and resources of the trees. This dual capability was likely a key survival strategy in its mosaic habitat, allowing it to exploit both arboreal and limited terrestrial opportunities. The story of Ardipithecus in the trees is a testament to the intricate dance between evolution and environment. Its unique anatomy allowed it to thrive in a world that was neither fully forested nor fully open, bridging the gap between ancient ape ancestors and the earliest bipedal hominins. It reminds us that evolution is rarely a straightforward path, but a series of experiments, compromises, and innovations driven by the relentless pressures of survival. Understanding its life in the canopy is crucial for appreciating the full complexity of our own evolutionary journey. In our last segment, we climbed into the ancient canopy, revealing Ardipithecus as a formidable arboreal master, perfectly adapted for life in the trees. We saw how its grasping big toe, long arms, and flexible wrists allowed it to navigate the forest with remarkable agility, finding food and seeking refuge. Yet the story of Ardipithecus is not solely confined to the branches. Its unique anatomy, a mosaic of ape-like and human-like features, hints at another crucial aspect of its existence: its cautious ground forays, the upright challenge. Today, we descend from the safety of the trees to explore how this pioneering hominin began to experiment with terrestrial movement, taking tentative, yet profoundly significant steps towards the bipedalism that would define our lineage. The very concept of Ardipithecus venturing onto the ground, let alone walking upright, was initially met with skepticism by some scientists. For decades, the prevailing view held that bipedalism evolved as a primary adaptation to open grasslands, a response to a world where trees were scarce and long-distance travel on two legs was advantageous. However, the evidence from Ardipithecus, particularly the structure of its pelvis and the absence of certain ape-like terrestrial adaptations, forces a re-evaluation of this long-standing hypothesis. Ardi suggests that the earliest forms of bipedalism were not about efficient, long-distance striding across savannas, but rather about a unique, perhaps less efficient way of moving within a more complex wooded environment. Let's return to Ardi's pelvis, a key piece of evidence that distinguishes her from quadrupedal apes. While her pelvis was not as short and broad as that of later, more obligately bipedal hominins like Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy, it clearly shows a reorganization of the ilium, the upper blade of the hip bone. In apes, the ilium is long and oriented more towards the back, providing muscle attachment points that are efficient for climbing and for swinging the legs forward during quadrupedal locomotion. In humans, the ilium is shorter and broader, curved around the side of the body. This reorientation allows the gluteal muscles, like the gluteus medius and minimus, to act as abductors, muscles that pull the leg sideways, which are crucial for stabilizing the pelvis and preventing it from tilting when one leg is lifted off the ground during walking. Ardi's ilium, though still somewhat primitive, shows this crucial broadening and shortening, indicating that some of her gluteal muscles were beginning to be repositioned for bipedal stabilization, even if imperfectly. This pelvic structure suggests that when Ardipithecus stood or walked upright, its gait would have been different from both modern humans and chimpanzees. It likely wasn't the efficient striding walk of a modern human, nor the waddling, bent knee, bent hip gait of a chimpanzee walking bipedally. Instead, it might have been a more deliberate, perhaps slightly awkward waddle with a greater degree of side-to-side sway. The unique combination of a grasping big toe and a rigid midfoot in her foot also implies a less efficient push-off than a human foot, but one that could still bear weight during terrestrial locomotion. This suggests a form of bipedalism that was likely facultative, meaning it was used occasionally or for specific purposes, rather than being the primary mode of locomotion. Crucially, the fossil evidence from Ardipithecus also reveals a distinct lack of adaptations for knuckle walking, the specialized form of quadrupedal locomotion practiced by chimpanzees and gorillas on the ground. Knuckle walking involves stiffening the wrist and supporting body weight on the backs of the fingers. The wrist bones of Ardipithecus show a flexibility that is incompatible with knuckle walking, indicating that when she was on the ground, she was not moving like a chimpanzee. This is a significant point of divergence from our closest living relatives and further supports the idea that her terrestrial movement involved some form of upright posture. So, if Ardipithecus was still so well adapted for tree dwelling, why would it venture onto the ground and attempt to walk upright, even if only occasionally? The mosaic environment of the Middle Awash region, as we discussed in Part 2, provides the most compelling answers. The landscape was a patchwork of woodlands and gallery forests, interspersed with more open patches. This fragmentation meant that Ardipithecus might have needed to traverse these open areas to move between forest patches, to access isolated food trees, or to reach vital water sources. Walking upright, even for short distances, could have offered several advantages in these transitional zones. One key advantage of bipedalism, even in its nascent form, is carrying capacity. If Ardipithecus encountered a particularly abundant patch of fruit or other food resources, walking upright would have freed its hands to carry more items back to a safer, more secluded spot, perhaps within the trees, or to share with offspring or other group members. This ability to transport resources efficiently could have been a significant selective pressure, even in a wooded environment. Imagine a female Ardipithecus carrying a handful of figs or a small infant while navigating between patches of woodland, a task made significantly easier by upright posture. Another potential benefit could have been access to new food sources on the ground that were not easily reachable from the trees. While much of their diet would have been arboreal, venturing onto the forest floor could have provided access to fallen fruits, tubers, or even small, slow-moving invertebrates that were not available in the canopy. Walking upright might have also allowed for more efficient visual scanning in slightly more open areas, enabling them to spot both food and potential predators from a slightly elevated vantage point. While not as crucial in dense forest, this could have been beneficial in the more fragmented woodlands. The unique combination of arboreal and terrestrial adaptations in Ardipithecus suggests a creature that was highly versatile, able to exploit resources and navigate challenges in both environments. This versatility was likely a key to its survival in a world that was constantly changing. It wasn't forced out of the trees onto a barren savanna. Rather, it retained its arboreal mastery while simultaneously exploring the advantages of upright movement on the ground as its habitat became more varied. This implies a gradual, opportunistic evolution of bipedalism, driven by the specific demands of its mosaic environment, rather than a sudden, dramatic shift. The discovery of Ardipithecus has fundamentally reshaped our understanding of the origins of bipedalism. It suggests that the earliest steps towards upright walking occurred in a wooded context, not necessarily on open grasslands. It also highlights the concept of mosaic evolution, where different anatomical features evolve at different rates, leading to a complex mix of primitive and derived traits within a single species. Ardipithecus was not a missing link in a simple linear chain. It was a unique evolutionary experiment, a branch on our family tree that shows us the diverse ways our ancestors adapted to their changing world. Its cautious ground forays represent a pivotal moment, a testament to the evolutionary pressures that slowly but surely nudged our lineage towards an upright stance. The journey of human evolution is far more intricate and fascinating than once imagined. Ardipithecus, with its unique blend of arboreal mastery and tentative bipedalism, stands as a powerful reminder of the complex adaptive strategies employed by our earliest ancestors. It provides a crucial window into a time when the very foundations of human locomotion were being laid, not in a grand, sweeping stride, but in cautious, experimental steps between the trees. In our previous segments, we've meticulously explored the shifting world of 6 million years ago, the mosaic habitat of Ardipithecus, and the extraordinary transitional anatomy of Ardi herself, revealing her mastery in the trees and her cautious, yet significant, forays onto the ground. Now we delve deeper into the daily existence of these pioneering hominins. What was their social structure like? What did they eat? How did they navigate the constant dangers of their ancient world? Today, we will piece together the clues to understand the social life and survival, daily challenges faced by Ardipithecus in its dynamic environment. Understanding the social life of a species that lived millions of years ago, based primarily on fossilized bones and teeth, is a challenging endeavor. However, the unique features of Ardipithecus, particularly its dentition, offer compelling insights into its potential social dynamics. A key piece of evidence comes from the canine teeth. In many primate species, particularly chimpanzees and gorillas, male canines are significantly larger, sharper, and more projecting than those of females. These large canines serve as formidable weapons, primarily used in aggressive displays, and direct combat between males competing for mates or social dominance. This sexual dimorphism in canine size is a strong indicator of high levels of male-male aggression and a hierarchical social structure where physical intimidation plays a significant role. In stark contrast, the canine teeth of Ardipithecus ramidus, both male and female, were small and non-projecting, much more similar in size and shape to those of early hominins and modern humans. This reduction in canine size and the diminished sexual dimorphism is a striking feature. While Ardipithecus males were still larger than females, a common primate trait, the lack of large, aggressive canines suggests a significant shift in social behavior. It implies a reduction in male-male aggression and a potential move away from intense physical competition for mates. This could indicate a more cooperative social structure, perhaps involving pair bonding or a greater degree of paternal care, where males might have shared resources or contributed to raising offspring. If males were not constantly fighting, the need for such intimidating dental weaponry would diminish. This subtle dental clue paints a fascinating, albeit speculative, picture of a more peaceful and collaborative social environment for our earliest ancestors. Beyond social dynamics, the teeth of Ardipithecus also provide crucial information about its diet. The wear patterns on their molars and the overall structure of their teeth suggest that Ardipithecus was likely an omnivore with a diet primarily consisting of fruits, soft leaves, and other plant matter, but also potentially including insects and small invertebrates. The relatively thin enamel on their molars, compared to later hominins like Australopithecus, with thick enamel for grinding tough foods, indicates that Ardipithecus was not regularly consuming hard, abrasive items like nuts, seeds, or tough grasses. This dietary preference aligns perfectly with the paleobotanical evidence we discussed in Part 2, which indicated a wooded environment rich in arboreal resources. Their diet would have been largely dictated by the seasonal availability of ripe fruits and tender foliage within their forest and forest edge habitat. The daily life of Ardipithecus would have revolved around the constant search for food and water, coupled with the ever-present need for survival against predators. In their mosaic environment, threats could come from both the trees and the ground. While the trees offered refuge, they were not entirely safe. Large birds of prey could pose a threat to infants, and arboreal snakes or smaller carnivores might have been present. On the ground, the dangers were more pronounced. The fossil record of the Middle Awash region during this period includes remains of formidable carnivores such as large felids, ancestral big cats, hyenids, ancestral hyenas, and crocodiles in the waterways. For a relatively small hominin like Ardipithecus, roughly the size of a modern chimpanzee, around 1.2 meters or 4 feet tall and 50 kilos or 110 lbs, these predators would have represented a constant and serious threat. How did Ardipithecus mitigate these risks? Their arboreal mastery was undoubtedly their primary defense. The ability to quickly ascend into the canopy, using their grasping feet and long arms, would have provided an immediate escape route from most terrestrial predators. Sleeping in trees, as many primates do, would have offered relative safety during the vulnerable hours of darkness. Their cautious ground forays, as explored in Part 5, would have been strategic, likely limited to short distances between forest patches, minimizing their exposure to open areas where they would be most vulnerable. The presence of a grasping foot, even when walking upright, might have allowed for quicker re-entry into the trees if danger arose. Social grouping would also have played a crucial role in survival. While the exact size of Ardipithecus groups is unknown, most primates live in social units, and it's highly probable that Ardipithecus did too. Living in groups provides multiple benefits: increased vigilance against predators, more eyes and ears, collective defense, though limited against large carnivores, and cooperative foraging. The reduced canine size, suggesting lower male-male aggression, might even hint at more stable, cohesive groups where individuals could rely on each other for support and protection. Shared knowledge of food sources and safe routes would also be invaluable. The challenges of daily life would have been numerous. Beyond predator avoidance and food acquisition, Ardipithecus would have faced the vagaries of its environment: seasonal changes in food availability, the need to find consistent water sources, and navigating a complex, ever-changing landscape. The volcanic activity associated with the East African Rift Valley, while providing valuable ash layers for dating, would also have posed dangers with occasional eruptions and seismic activity. The need to adapt to these fluctuating conditions would have continuously driven evolutionary pressures. The picture that emerges of Ardipithecus's social life and survival strategies is one of a versatile, adaptable primate, deeply intertwined with its mosaic woodland environment. Its unique anatomy allowed it to exploit both arboreal and terrestrial resources, while its social behaviors, hinted at by its reduced canines, suggest a move towards greater cooperation. This was a critical period of experimentation, where our ancestors were trying out different ways of living, moving, and interacting, laying the groundwork for the more complex social structures and adaptive strategies that would characterize later hominins. The story of Ardipithecus is not just about bones and teeth. It's about the daily struggles and triumphs of a species on the cusp of becoming human. It's about the subtle shifts in behavior and anatomy that, over millions of years, would lead to our own unique place in the world. Understanding their social fabric and their challenges provides a deeper appreciation for the long, complex journey of human evolution. In our journey through the deep past, we've explored the world of Ardipithecus, a pioneering hominin navigating a mosaic landscape of woodlands and forest edges. We've dissected Ardi's unique anatomy, revealing her mastery in the trees and her cautious yet significant forays onto the ground. We've even speculated on her social life and the daily challenges of survival. But the story of human evolution is one of relentless change, and the environmental forces that shaped Ardipithecus did not cease with its existence. Instead, the changing landscape accelerated, putting new and intense pressures for bipedalism on subsequent hominin lineages, driving our ancestors further down the path towards an obligate upright stance. The dynamic geological forces that initiated the East African Rift Valley continued their relentless work, even intensifying after the time of Ardipithecus. The African tectonic plate continued to stretch and pull apart, leading to more dramatic uplift of the rift shoulders and the formation of deeper, more pronounced valleys. Imagine the Earth's crust slowly tearing apart, creating colossal fault lines and towering escarpments. This geological activity wasn't just about creating dramatic scenery, it had profound climatic consequences. The rising mountains and plateaus created increasingly effective rain shadows, blocking moisture-laden air from reaching the areas to their west. This meant that while regions on the eastern side of the rift might have retained some forest cover due to direct ocean influence, the central and western parts of the rift, where many hominin fossils are found, became progressively drier. Accompanying this geological upheaval was a continuation, and even an acceleration, of the global cooling and drying trend that began in the late Miocene. While Ardipithecus lived in a relatively humid woodland mosaic, the period that followed saw a more pronounced shift towards increased aridity and seasonality in East Africa. This was influenced by a complex interplay of factors, including long-term global climate cycles, such as Milankovitch cycles, which affect Earth's orbit and tilt, influencing solar radiation distribution, and the ongoing reshaping of continents and ocean currents. The drying of the Mediterranean, which we discussed in Part 1, was an early indicator of this broader trend. As millions of years passed, rainfall became less predictable, with longer dry seasons and more intense wet seasons, further stressing the existing ecosystems. The most visible consequence of this intensified drying was the fragmentation and reduction of dense forests. The continuous canopies that Ardipithecus relied upon began to shrink, breaking up into smaller, more isolated patches of gallery forest along rivers and scattered woodlands. In between these shrinking forest islands, vast expanses of true grasslands and savannas began to expand. This was not a uniform, sudden transformation, but a gradual, complex process, creating a patchwork of open plains, shrublands, and dwindling tree cover. For any primate adapted to arboreal life, this changing landscape presented an existential challenge: how to survive and thrive when your primary habitat is literally disappearing beneath your feet, forcing you to traverse increasingly open and exposed terrain. These accelerating environmental changes exerted powerful new selective pressures on hominin populations. While Ardipithecus's facultative bipedalism might have been sufficient for its mosaic woodland, the increasingly open environments of the Pliocene, the epoch following the Miocene, roughly 5.3 to 2.6 million years ago, demanded a more efficient and committed form of upright walking. One of the most immediate pressures was the increased need for terrestrial travel between resources. As forest patches became smaller and more isolated, hominins could no longer simply swing or climb from tree to find food, water, or safe sleeping sites. They were increasingly forced to descend to the ground and walk across open, exposed stretches of grassland to reach the next clump of trees or a distant waterhole. An efficient bipedal gait would dramatically reduce the energy expenditure required for such long-distance travel, making it a highly advantageous adaptation. The ability to cover more ground with less energy would directly impact foraging success and access to vital resources. Another critical pressure in these expanding open environments was predator avoidance. On the savanna, there is far less cover for a small, relatively slow-moving primate. Large carnivores like big cats, including early saber-toothed species, and hyenas would have been constant threats. Walking upright offers a significant advantage. It allows for a higher vantage point, enabling hominins to spot predators over tall grasses from a greater distance, providing crucial extra seconds for escape or to seek refuge. This early warning system could mean the difference between life and death. Furthermore, being upright might have made hominins appear larger and more intimidating to some predators, though this is debated. The ability to quickly scan the horizon for danger would have been paramount for survival in these exposed landscapes. Thermoregulation also emerged as a significant selective pressure in the hot, open environments. On the savanna, the sun beats down relentlessly. Walking upright reduces the amount of body surface area directly exposed to the sun's most intense rays, particularly during the hottest parts of the day. A bipedal stance exposes less of the body's surface to direct solar radiation compared to a quadrupedal posture. Additionally, an upright posture allows for greater exposure to cooling breezes, aiding in heat dissipation and preventing overheating. This would have been a crucial adaptation for extended periods of activity under the intense African sun, allowing hominins to forage during parts of the day when quadrupeds might be forced to seek shade. Finally, the efficiency of carrying became even more critical. In an open environment where food and water sources might be widely scattered, the ability to transport resources back to a central location, a safe sleeping tree, a water source, or a shared eating spot, would be highly advantageous. Whether it was carrying gathered fruits, scavenged meat, or dependent infants, freeing the hands by walking upright would have allowed for greater provisioning and resource accumulation. This capacity for carrying could have directly impacted the survival and reproductive success of individuals and groups. These intensifying pressures drove profound anatomical changes in hominins that succeeded Ardipithecus. While Ardi had a grasping big toe and a partially adapted pelvis, later hominins like Australopithecus would show a more fully adducted big toe aligned with the other toes, forming a rigid arch for efficient push-off during walking. Their pelvis would become even shorter and broader, more fully resembling the human pelvis, allowing for more stable and efficient bipedal locomotion. Their legs would lengthen relative to their arms, a clear adaptation for efficient terrestrial striding, and their feet would lose their grasping capability, becoming dedicated platforms for walking. These changes reflect a growing commitment to bipedalism, a transition from a facultative, part-time upright stance to a more obligate bipedalism, where walking on two legs became the primary and most efficient mode of locomotion. The story of the Carboniferous period reminds us of the profound impact of environmental change on life. Similarly, the accelerating landscape transformation in East Africa, driven by ongoing geological forces and climatic shifts, was the ultimate selective agent that pushed our ancestors towards a more committed bipedalism. Ardipithecus represents a crucial early experiment, a bridge between two worlds. But the pressures intensified, and evolution responded, leading to the emergence of hominins who were increasingly at home on 2 feet, ready to explore the vast open landscapes that would define the next chapter of our story. This relentless environmental pressure, forcing our ancestors to adapt or perish, is a powerful reminder of the dynamic interplay between Earth's systems and the evolution of life. The challenges presented by the changing landscape were met with extraordinary biological innovation, fundamentally altering the trajectory of our lineage. The stage was set for the next great leap in human evolution, where bipedalism would become not just an option, but a defining characteristic. In our extensive journey through time, we have meticulously reconstructed the world of Ardipithecus, a dynamic East African landscape 6 million years ago, shaped by colossal geological forces. We've peered into its mosaic habitat of woodlands and forest edges, dissected its unique transitional anatomy, a blend of arboreal mastery and cautious bipedalism, and even speculated on its social life and daily struggles for survival. Most recently, we explored how accelerating environmental changes intensified the pressures for bipedalism, pushing subsequent hominin lineages further towards an obligate upright stance. Now, in this concluding segment, we reflect on the profound legacy of Ardi, our deepest roots, understanding her pivotal, often controversial place in the grand narrative of human origins and what her story ultimately teaches us about ourselves. The discovery and subsequent analysis of Ardipithecus remitis, particularly the remarkably complete skeleton of Ardi, fundamentally reshaped the field of paleoanthropology. Before Ardi, the dominant view of human evolution often envisioned a more direct, linear progression from a chimpanzee-like ancestor to a fully bipedal hominin, with the transition occurring primarily on open savannas. It was thought that the last common ancestor LCA of chimpanzees and humans was very chimp-like, and that bipedalism evolved as a sudden dramatic shift once our ancestors left the trees. Ardi, however, complicated this neat picture, forcing scientists to embrace a more complex and nuanced understanding of our evolutionary past. One of Ardi's most significant contributions is her demonstration of mosaic evolution. This concept highlights that different anatomical features evolve at different rates, leading to a complex mix of primitive, ancestral, and derived, more recently evolved traits within a single species. Ardi's body is a perfect embodiment of this. Her grasping big toe and long arms are clearly primitive, reflecting her arboreal heritage, while her reorganized pelvis and non-knuckle-walking wrists are derived, hinting at her nascent bipedalism. This mosaic nature challenges the idea of a simple, step-by-step transformation. Instead, it suggests that evolution experimented with various combinations of traits, leading to species that were uniquely adapted to their specific environments, rather than simply being intermediate stages on a linear path to modern humans. Ardi was not simply a missing link in a chain. She was a distinct and successful species in her own right, representing a crucial early branch in the hominin family tree. Ardi's existence in a woodland mosaic, rather than an open savanna, also forced a reevaluation of the savanna hypothesis as the sole driver for the origin of bipedalism. While later hominins certainly thrived on the savanna, Ardi suggests that the initial steps towards upright walking occurred in a more forested context. This implies that the advantages of bipedalism in its earliest forms might have been different from those typically associated with open grasslands. Perhaps it was about more efficient movement between fragmented forest patches, or the ability to carry resources while still being able to climb. This new perspective opens up a richer array of possibilities for the selective pressures that favored bipedalism, moving beyond a single simplistic explanation. The reduced canine size in Ardipithecus, with its diminished sexual dimorphism, is another profound part of Ardi's legacy. This feature, so unlike the large aggressive canines of male chimpanzees and gorillas, hints at a significant shift in social dynamics. It suggests a potential reduction in male-male aggression and a move towards more cooperative behaviors, possibly including pair bonding or increased paternal care. If early hominin males were less focused on aggressive competition for mates, this could have freed up energy for other activities, such as foraging or resource sharing, which in turn could have contributed to the survival and reproductive success of the group. This dental evidence provides a rare glimpse into the social fabric of our earliest ancestors, suggesting that some of the cooperative traits we associate with humanity may have very deep roots. Furthermore, Ardipithecus provides crucial insights. into the last common ancestor, LCA, shared by humans and chimpanzees. Before Ardi's discovery, many scientists assumed the LCA was very chimpanzee-like, engaging in knuckle walking and spending most of its time in trees. Ardi's anatomy, however, suggests a more generalized ape ancestor, one that was neither a knuckle walker nor a brachiator, arm swinger like a gibbon, but rather a cautious climber that moved on all fours on top of branches. This implies that chimpanzees and gorillas evolved their specialized knuckle walking independently after diverging from the hominin lineage, rather than hominins evolving bipedalism from a knuckle walking ancestor. Ardi pushes back the timeline. For when our lineage began to diverge in fundamental ways from that of other apes, highlighting a more complex evolutionary journey for all great apes. The very process of Ardi's discovery and interpretation underscores the ongoing nature of scientific inquiry. The initial findings sparked intense debate, with some researchers questioning the extent of her bipedalism or her direct ancestral status. This scientific discourse, however, is a healthy and essential part of the process. New fossil finds, improved analytical techniques, and reevaluations of existing data continuously refine our understanding. Ardipithecus serves as a powerful reminder that the story of human evolution is not a static textbook chapter, but a dynamic, unfolding narrative, with new discoveries constantly challenging and enriching our knowledge. It emphasizes that our understanding of the deep past is always provisional, subject to revision as new evidence emerges. Ultimately, the legacy of Ardi is profound. She represents our deepest roots, a pivotal species that provides a crucial window into the very earliest stages of what it means to be human. Her story is one of adaptation in the face of environmental change, of evolutionary experimentation, and of the complex interplay between anatomy, behavior, and environment. She shows us that the path to bipedalism was not a simple, straightforward march, but a nuanced and opportunistic journey that began in a world far more complex than previously imagined. Ardipithecus stands as a testament to the incredible resilience and adaptability of life. In a world undergoing dramatic geological and climatic shifts, a creature emerged that found a unique way to survive and thrive, laying the foundational steps for a lineage that would eventually walk upright, develop complex brains, create tools, and ultimately ponder its own origins. Her story is a powerful reminder that our own existence is inextricably linked to millions of years of evolutionary history, a continuous thread connecting us to ancient landscapes and the remarkable creatures that inhabited them. As we conclude this series, we are left with a deeper appreciation for the long and winding road of human evolution. From the shifting continents and drying seas to the cautious steps of Ardipithecus between forest and open ground, every chapter of Earth's history has played a role in shaping who we are. The legacy of Ardi is not just a scientific finding. It is a profound connection to our past, a humbling reminder of our place in the grand tapestry of life on Earth. The journey of discovery continues, and with each new fossil, each new insight, we come closer to understanding the extraordinary story of our deepest roots.